Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schleckser, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large-size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another Lazy CEO podcast. My name is Jim Schleckser. I am your host and the founder of the CEO Project. Today, we've got a guest, and gosh, I have known Kirk for, I think we were both 12 when we met. I'm not sure, but a very long time as we grew our careers and went through a variety of intersections and, parallel paths. He first got to know him when he was working in an ad agency. We're doing a lot of work in the automotive space, but really advanced technical stuff in those days, including working with, this is going to tell people how old we are, Prodigy. Later, I had a couple of gigs in tier one suppliers and ultimately the chief strategy officer for Textron through a massive period of growth and expansion and performance and stock increase at Textron. He later went on to take over a company called Savage, which is where he is now. And this is a logistics company that does moves all kind of bulk products around the world, big, heavy stuff all over the place, and has gone through a huge number of interesting transitions while he's there during his career. So we're going to talk to Kirk about what he did right, what he maybe could have done differently, his insights to being a great CEO, and we'll have some fun together. So Kirk, welcome.
Morning, Jim. Thanks for having me.
So glad you could join us. This will be a blast. So how long have you been at Savage now? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what Savage does too, because I did a horrible job explaining it, I know.
No, you did a great job. The company's almost 80 years old, founded by three brothers in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. We still have the first truck in our lobby that the brothers actually bought. They were trucking coal and timber in Utah. And we've gone from that one truck 80 years ago the three of them to 4,200 team members and 225 locations around the world. So we have about 1,000 trucks running around. We have vessels and trains, and we run about 100 rail cars of grain across the U.S.-Mexico border every day. So we've got a lot of stuff moving around.
Wow. So is this a relatively lower margin business? In other words, like big numbers against low margin? I mean, it feels like it's a hard business to make money at, like a lot of capital, maybe thin margins. I don't know, but that's kind of the question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think for a lot of these kinds of businesses, they are lower margin for us. The niche we've kind of carved out is material that's really important to the customers. So if we don't move material for these customers, whether it's petroleum, coke, crude oil, coal, grain, their plants shut down. And so, and a lot of the materials actually are very difficult to manage, right? So we say they catch fire, they explode, they drown, they burn, they maim. It's all the stuff it makes attracting team members so easy, right? It's
sign me up.
Yeah. But it's hard to handle, and you need expertise. And so the margins are significantly better than kind of a you call, we haul. All of our systems are closed loop. They're in plants. They're embedded in the customer's operation, or they're our own, and we run them that way. So we're about $4.5 billion in revenues, and some of that is trading grain. So there's some of that that's significantly lower margin than the rest of the business.
Got it. Interesting. We had a client who did logistics into the automotive industry, into the assembly lines, sort of, highly expedited. Like if we don't get these parts by 2:00 today, the line shuts down, kind of crazy stuff. It sounds like you're not quite there, but very similar kind of model.
Yeah, no, we're in that. I mean, I lived in that world for a while. And when you shut an automotive plant down, it's a couple $100,000 a minute and you get charged for it. So it's not great, but yeah, the traditional logistics business is typically characterized by somebody calling to use somebody else's assets. And that's not a business that we're in. We own our own trucks. We own our own rail cars and locomotives and our equipment. Sometimes we do manage other people's equipment, which is in plants, but it's part of a broader system.
Got it. Interesting. Now, does that mean you're less cyclical? Because the logistics industry has been jerked back and forth over the last decade. At the moment, it's a bit soft generally. Do you not experience that kind of cyclicality, or are you still exposed to it?
No, I mean, I can tell you that through the 15 years I've been there, we've had one down year, wow. We actually grew through the 2008, 2009. We were steady during COVID. We continued to run, all of our operations during COVID. All of our people were working. And so, yeah, no, we haven't seen that kind of cyclicality. We've got a certain amount of diversity in the business, right? Where we've got different sectors that we operate in. When one is up, another one's down, which is something I think for a lot of businesses, when you're tied to one industry or one sector, that can cause you problems, which we haven't had.
So Kirk is intimately familiar with this sort of kink in the hose theory of constraint stuff that we talk about. What is the point of constraint in this business? Well, if you had your magic wand, what would you change about this business to make it a significantly better business?
Yeah, the constraint to growth for us is leadership talent, and it's leadership talent at the local operation level. So we've got a great team, senior level team. We've got great team members. We know how to attract them. We know how to retain them. It's hard to grow the folks that run our system, and so we work really hard. We've created a system called On Deck, where we actually tee up potential managers. They nominate themselves or somebody else nominates them. We get them ready. The way we used to do it, and this is one of those lessons learned that you talked about at the outset, we used to just take somebody and say, hey, you're going to go run a plant in North Dakota. What had they done before that? They've been a really good team member.
Yeah.
And so that learning to do that was not great. And so a combination of preparing them and having a strong system, consistent system, makes it easier for us to make that transition. But there's still a shortage of those folks, and it's hard to grow them quickly.
So this is an internal, savage you that you run them through to give them the basics of how to be a manager, how to be a leader.
Yeah. We teach them we call it S7, our savage operating system. They have a mentor, so they have somebody who's been an operations manager. They have a kind of a team, and there's a process that they're going through, and it's really powerful. We go through a graduation. Leadership team is there with them. It's a big deal for them, and it's really exciting. I think we've got 45 or almost 50 of these folks that are out there now doing great.
So you've been able to correlate. They went through the S7 educational program, and then the performance level that we see in the field is sort of a step level better than you might have expected if we just dropped them in like we used to.
Yeah, no, there's no question. We've seen much higher consistency. They get up to speed faster. I mean, it's the classic thing, right? Where you want somebody, a smart person who's talented is going to figure things out. What we're trying to do is make sure that we remove the things that they shouldn't have to figure out. And so the combination of putting them through the On Deck program and then also having a powerful delivery system, you really get, it's a great marriage. We always had the delivery system. That was always a powerful part of our model, which allowed us to grow. But now marrying it to a way to stage people and get them ready is really great too.
So you said it's still a constraint, though. I mean, it feels like, is it just not enough people putting their hands in the air? Is it people don't want to take responsibility? I mean, it feels like, hey, if you can get through the program and we like you get a better job, bigger job, more money, more responsibility. Is that why isn't there a flood at the door on this?
Yeah, and some of it is, we got operations all over the world. We've got places in the world that, when I say, hey, Jim, I want you to go run an operation in North Dakota.
Kirk, what did I do wrong?
Why am I being punished in this way? But yeah, no, we've got people who, they get nominated or they nominate themselves. We've got some people who don't want to move. They don't want to relocate. And so that's a challenge. And basically it's just it's an intensive process to run people through it. And so you've got a constraint also at the level of mentorship as well. So we're just working through those systems.
Got it. And how have you found trying to recruit people in at the supervisor manager level? I mean, it feels like you have a pretty strong culture. Are you able to bring people into that culture that at a managerial level, or How has that worked? Because that's some people struggle with that.
Yeah, I think we struggle with it too, because we bring people in from the class one railroads. We'll bring
Yep.
people in from plants. A lot of the places we're operating are adjacent to refineries or power plants or chemical plants. Those folks typically are union. We're largely not.
Got it.
And so there are cultural, you're right, there are cultural differences that make it somewhat challenging to bring them in. A lot of times people, they know about us, they know our reputation, and they're attracted to it. And we use it. We try to have it be a magnetic part of this whole process, right? We want people to come, be attracted, and stay. And so we make those decisions carefully.
Yep. So culture, clearly important, but it doesn't happen by accident. And obviously the history helps, but what do you do to sort of reinforce and manage the culture of an organization like this, particularly as distributed as you are, that I want to feel like I'm part of this thing, even though I'm in North Dakota? Like, how do you do that?
It is the biggest challenge, and it's the thing that keeps us up at night. It's right. As you grow, how do you preserve, how do you enhance the culture? And you're absolutely right. The heritage helps a lot. The fact that the company was started by three brothers, it wasn't a single sole proprietor. It wasn't somebody making decisions on their own and doing whatever they wanted to do. Those three brothers didn't make significant decisions without being in agreement. And that culture created there was a very strong connection among them, and they extended that to everybody they dealt with. So we talk about it being a kind of culture of connection. And that culture of connection, we extend to our team members, to our customers, to our suppliers, everybody. And so we build relationships as opposed to just have an economic basis. But I think the glue that binds us is something that it's our vision and legacy that was created. It was written by the brothers 50 years after they'd been in business.
Wow.
And that we call that our cultural constitution. That is the thing that we say that, leaders in our company are expected to live and lead according to vision and legacy. And then we've made it more accessible for all team members. It's like the Constitution of the United States. You're not going to sit down and just, read it, memorize it, and apply it every day as you work. So we boiled the vision and legacy down to three statements, right? Do the right thing, find a better way, make a difference. If you do those three things, that's all you need to know. You don't need to have an employee handbook or any of the other stuff. You do those three things, you're going to be okay.
Nice. I had one company I was running, and the chief admin said, "Hey, we had like 30 people, right?" He goes, "We need an employee handbook." I'm like, "All right, I'm going to write it for you. Ready? Get a pencil. Be an adult professional." Okay, that's it.
Don't get us in trouble. Yeah,
well, if you think like, what would an adult professional do? You're probably going to make the right decision most of the time, at least. Maybe not all the time.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and it's true for most businesses, as you get bigger and you get more complex. For us, when it's more spread out, I mean, when I got there, there were very limited actual policies, and there were some things you needed to have standardization in order to grow.
Sure.
And so for us, a big part of our growth was around creating scalability and looking at, you talk about the theory of constraints, right? Looking down the stream and thinking what's in the river down below you that's going to get in the way. For us, it was designing systems and processes that wouldn't limit our growth.
Yeah.
And recognizing you sort of have a growth trajectory and you're going to bump into something pretty quickly if you don't design the systems and processes and the people. There are certain key positions. When you're an 80-year-old company, you get a certain amount of organizational cholesterol, right? It just builds up, and you get people who've been with you a long time, who may not, they may have been the people who get you where you were, but they're not the people who are going to get you where you need to go.
Yeah. And
so we went out and hired a CFO who'd been where we were going, and we hired a couple of other key positions to say, hey, we need people who don't have to figure this out.
Yep. Well, we've seen that in a couple, where companies get stuck at a level and they go, the talent that got us to 150 or 300 or 500 million dollars can't get us to $1 billion. They're already right at the edge of their headlights and maybe past their headlights. So they can hang on for dear life, but they can't push the issue. And that's the difference. I think the kind of talent you talk about versus maybe legacy talent. It's super painful, though, particularly when it's such a familial business, though. How did you manage that process of like, hey, Biff, love you to death. You've been here 30 years, but you're not going to be doing what you used to do.
Well,
How do you do that?
it's one of the toughest things in the kind of growth that we've had as a company. You go from when I got here we were 500 million in revenues and we're 4.5 billion now. You start talking about that kind of complexity. You can't expect people to necessarily know how to do that. And so we did it based on really carefully defining what was expected in these positions and going back to the three brothers and saying, this is part of our vision and legacy. It is, we are expected to grow this company for future generations. That's our expectation. In order to do that, we're going to need to make some decisions. But they were very, very tough because it is a family-owned business, but professionally managed. So it's a little bit of a distinction there.
Yeah. Now you're the second non-family CEO.
Yeah, there have been 3 CEOs in 80 years. The first was one of the brothers, and then the second and third are non-family.
Got it. Okay. And just, I know well, let me go back before I go to that one. So if you had to look back over your 15 years there now, what would be the 2 or 3 decisions that you would change? And then where I'm going is Bezos says, I make like 4 decisions a year that matter, right? I make 100 decisions. I make 4 that matter. I wonder if I gave you a redo on 2 or 3 decisions, would you I might change how I handled that particular one, just as a learning exercise. I'm not trying to embarrass you.
No, they're fair decisions. And it's funny because we bought a barge business. We've done 20 acquisitions in the last 10 years, pretty significant. We've done almost $2 billion of acquisitions, and it's, we bought a barge business that we didn't totally understand, and we really almost killed it. So I would do that differently.
Meaning wouldn't have done the deal, or would have managed the integration differently?
Would have managed the integration differently, and probably wouldn't have done the deal if we'd understood the business better. We thought it was a similar business to the rest of our business and found that it was sort of a you call, we haul by water.
Got it. Which is not your business. You're
very, very commoditized and very high risk. Think of Baltimore and think of bad things that happen on the water. They tend to be very, very expensive and risky. And so that was one. Turned out okay. We ended up selling it and doing okay, doing fine. But I would do that differently. Probably a key hire that we made at a senior level. We missed it.
And what was it? The vetting process, the interview process, and was it skill or will? What did you miss it on? Didn't have the talent, or just really didn't want to do the job we had for that person?
Cultural fit, right? Cultural fit, talent, no shortage of talent, no problem. You had all the credentials, capabilities. Kind of, we missed it. We have a pretty rigorous process for interviewing. But we missed it. And there were a bunch of us that were involved in the process. And we all, in retrospect, look back and say, how did we miss this?
Right. It was there if we were looking for it, right?
The guy we hired is not the guy who showed up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, it was a very different, it was sort of he'd kind of done his research, done his homework, figured out what he needed to do to sell us and represented himself that way, but that wasn't who he was. And we're being, this next round, we're in the process of looking for somebody in this role right now, and we're being very, very careful. We've learned from it. And
was it in a revenue generating role?
No.
Okay, because I've found salespeople to be the hardest people to interview, because they, what they sell better than anything in the world?
Themselves. Yeah. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. No, that they are very hard. That's a very hard position to hire for.
So how are you going to get around that? You had somebody on absolute best behavior. They did the research, to your point. They were on best behavior, and you go, sounds like an amazing human. But then when reality struck, how do you not buy that story?
Yeah, I think for, this is one of the hardest things in business is to hire people. The process is so flawed, right? It's you do the instruments to test people's personality assessment. You do check references. The references they provide are people that love them. It's just not a great process. And so we try to get around it by having different exposures, right? Where you have different people take the person to dinner, or do social things with them. You have it be a little more extended, and so that you get this, and you actually put people under certain kinds of stress in the process. And so we did all those things with this person. So the problem, we're having now is looking at it and saying, okay, what else do we need to do? That's the problem. And if somebody really wants to misrepresent who they are and feel like they're going to fit into the culture, I think it's a kind of a hard thing to get if they're really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because people think like the job is for me to get the job, but that's actually not the process. The process is figure each other out to make sure it's a great marriage.
Yeah.
Because you won the job and then the guy was gone in some amount of time. Who won? Nobody won.
Yeah. And nobody won. Although in this case, you sort of look at the person and say, there was method to this madness, right? This was a stepping stone to something else. I have to have this position in order to get this next one. And so I'm making it sound really kind of devious, but it in retrospect, it kind of looks pretty intentional.
Yeah, I hear an evil laugh in the background there. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something going on there, but shame on us because ultimately we're making the decision about this. But you're right. It should be the process to see if there's a fit, and that's what we try to make it. How do we really assess whether somebody's going to fit into this organization? We tend to do it by how did they interact with the person at the front desk when they came in the interview? How did they interact with my assistant or whoever when they're walking up to the interview? I mean, there are lots of sort of points where you get to see people and how they actually behave, and you need to pay attention to all of them.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard some sort of evil techniques of, you have the waiter or waitress spill wine in their lap and just see how they react. Right? Yeah. Oh, really? I mean, it's a horrible answer, but if they explode and they're screaming, they're yelling, and they're like, okay, that's a data point. Thank you. You go, okay, let's get some tonic water and get this out of here. Right.
Yeah. We've done, you do the personality assessments. As I said, we've got professionals that actually will do interviews that will look at them from a psychological perspective and do those things. There are people out there that do that stuff. And for certain kinds of positions, it makes sense to do everything you can to try to triangulate it, figure it out.
You had a third redo. You did two. You had one more.
Yeah, that was. Those
are two good ones for sure.
Those are two good ones. Yeah, I would say that the other one is probably the largest acquisition we ever did. Mm-hmm. Was a freestanding 114-year-old company. We kind of kept the owners in as minority owners in the bigger company, and they weren't used to not being in charge, and it was really, really hard for them. And so we ended up buying the rest of their shares out and moving on. But we should have done that right up front.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a similar feeling about earnouts.
Yeah.
Because I can't really go in and touch the business. If you go, hey, you touch anything, you affect my earnout. You can't touch the business for 2 years or 1 year, whatever the period is. I'm like,
right.
I got to tell you, I think in 9 out of 10 cases, I've said, tell you what, I'm going to write a check and buy your earnout out so I can go do what I have to do here.
Yeah. In the majority of, and we bought, when I first got there, we were buying more small companies, right? Yeah. So they were very dependent on the founder and the owner. We've recently been buying bigger companies, but in the smaller companies, it's very hard to leave the owner in place. Much as you want to, and much as everybody says, oh yeah, I really want to do this and I want to make it work. The first time you say, well, that's not our process or that's not our, it doesn't go well.
Yeah, right.
Go well.
We'd like you to come to the 3-day strategy meeting.
No. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, right. Not doing that. Yeah. By the way, and the $100 million you put in my bank causes me to really, really not want to do it. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Yeah, I have some go away money.
So just on that one, 114-year-old company, their culture must have been as strong, strongly brewed coffee as yours. How did you integrate those two companies? What were the moves to sort of bring those businesses together? Because cultural match, like the hire comment, is one of the key failure points on a merger of that type. So how did you manage that process of moving culture together?
Yeah, that was a really hard one. It's a great question because that was one typically or historically we've taken our S7 system and our processes and said, we know this is how you used to do it, but this is how you do it now.
Yeah.
And that's how we made it work. With this one, it was a big departure because it was a freestanding, very successful company where the values were aligned, but the cultures were different. Mm. And so we came up with something called a sector-centric business model. And we said, you will identify those things where we have to cooperate, where you have to do things, systems and processes and shared services that will be done, together. And then the rest of them, you leave them alone.
Yeah.
So we actually left them with their name. We added our, we added our sort of a Savage Company sub brand to it, but the people they deal with, they've been dealing with for 115 years, 114 years. We weren't going to screw that up, and there was no reason to do it. And it's turned out really well. And over time, it's been 6 years, over time, we've progressively gotten even closer on things that we didn't have to prescribe, just because they start to make sense. You say, well, why are we doing these two things separately? We should be doing them together. So yeah. It was a very, I had a lot of people, I had more people in Salt Lake who were upset about it than people who in Kansas City, where we did the transaction, because they didn't understand, why are you leaving them alone? Why are you letting them do this stuff? And it was sort of like, well, they do it well. Yeah. In some cases, that part of the business did it better than the legacy Savage business. And that was that was kind of a bitter pill to swallow. Example was their internship program was phenomenal. And so we just basically said, go figure out what they do and copy it, because it's awesome.
Good. That takes some humility. Hey, we bought you, but yet we're going to steal your good ideas, right? So,
well, and go back to the vision and legacy, and the vision and legacy talks about being better tomorrow than we are today. So you embed in the culture that there's a better way, find it. Then you have a hard time for somebody saying, "Oh no, I'm good," right? I can't be better. Yeah. It doesn't really fit our culture. And so when you see something that's better, it does. I had a boss at Textron who used to say, "You don't have to be bad to be better." And it's a great message for people to get. It's sort of like, let's always be looking for doing something better. Let's always be, we talk about stewardship in our business a lot, right? And the simplest definition of stewardship I know is leave something better than you find it.
Yeah.
And so that's embedded in our culture. Let's constantly be looking for ways to leave something better than we found it.
Love it. So you've announced that you're going to be exiting Savage at the end of the year. Yeah.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about the process you went through to identify a successor. Because, a lot of us, as we might sell our business or exit just because we're going to retire or repot or whatever the heck it is, because I don't think retirement's a real word for people that work with their brains. How did you do that? What was the process? What was the methodology used? How did you find the right person?
Yeah, so you kind of have to go back to when I joined the company in 2010, having been recruited outside.
Yeah, you were not a succession example.
No, right? and candidly, my last comment to the group that was responsible for kind of selecting me to come in from the board was, "Hey, I just want you to know we're never going to do this again." Right?
Right.
So literally the day after I got there, we started a succession planning committee and identified potential successors and started to monitor them. We crafted the sort of both experience set and the skill set. So what skills and capabilities does the CEO need to have, and what experiences does the CEO need to have? And then look at those candidates against those and look for opportunities to build those and put those people under pressure and stress to see how they perform and how they would be potentially in the role of CEO. So we started with 4 of those folks.
Got it.
And we ended up with a couple of them finalists and chose the one that we all felt was the best candidate.
Nice. And the board was involved in that process, obviously.
Board was involved. Board was less involved in the early stages, more involved as it got closer to my retirement. It's been on the radar for 18 months. 20. We knew what the time was going to be, and so everybody was tuned into, okay, this is how we're doing this process. Here are the candidates that we're working with. Here's my assessment. In our quarterly board meetings, there was, in the executive session, I always did an update. And then we would have the succession planning committee kind of meetings outside those once a year to look both at my successors and the leadership team and and throughout the organization, see what the succession, what the talent pipeline looked like.
Yeah, good. And I think a good board talent is one of the things that they must keep an eye on, certainly at the top couple of levels, just to make sure the flow is there and the people are in place. How did you give board exposure to the 4 or shrinking over time, 4 shrinking down candidates? Because you want the board to be familiar and comfortable with these people as well. They go, yeah, I know him or her. And how did you do that?
So our quarterly board meetings, we have 10 board members. 6 of them are independents. I'm on the board, and the 3 family representatives are on the board. Every board meeting, my leadership team is in the meetings.
Good. Okay.
And so they're presenting their parts of the business in the meeting. The board gets to see those folks. So all of the potential candidates were on my leadership team. And so they got exposure. We would do board dinners the night before. We would have participation. They would see, they saw the CFO in the audit committee. They would see the talent guy in the comp committee. They would, they got exposure. Board got exposure to these folks, both socially and in a business context.
Awesome. That's a great process. I'm going back to this a dated reference, but Welsh had 3 candidates. He picked one, and then the other 2 immediately got jobs at other places. Do you worry about flight risk of the people that didn't get picked?
2 of them are already gone.
There you go. Okay.
This happened. It definitely happens. And when the funnel gets narrow, it's hard to say, there are opportunities for people who, if you want to be a CEO, if you want to lead an organization, it's kind of hard to say, well, that guy got the job, but I'm doing this other piece. It's just a kind of a natural, unfortunately, it's a natural part of that selection process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and a compliment to you in the development process that they were able to pretty quickly roll over and go find themselves another big job, right? It's sort of flattering at some level, right?
Yeah. I mean, to go back to Welch, you go back to the days when GE was extraordinary at creating talent. They were a machine for generating managers and leaders, and not so much anymore, but certainly was at the time. And that's something I think we all kind of look at and say, my legacy, a big part of my legacy is, how does my successor handle the job?
Yep.
I'm not going to sit on the board. I'm not going to stay involved in the company. And so, because my predecessor was on our board for 3 years after he left, and that was just not a fun time. So
I actually wrote a scholarly, I just finished a little degree program, and I wrote a paper about basically, should the CEO go to the board after they exit?
Yeah.
And the answer is no.
Yeah.
And the reason why is the data says that the new CEO, because their former boss and the person who kind of put him in the seat is sitting there, you can start new things, but killing something that was sort of a pet project of the old, you can't touch the darn thing because it'll get defended at the board level. You're like, great. Yeah. So, and what happens is the minute that person leaves the board, all those little pet projects get vaporized.
Right.
like Dr. Evil took a laser beam to him, right?
Yeah, no, it's a sort of a weird thing, because you sort of go from, as you said, 24/7 doing this job to whatever this rewirement looks like. But it's not, it's hard when you've cared about something for 15 years to just sort of say, oh, I no longer care about it. But the good news is, we will stay involved. The relationships are there. I'm not worried if they need to reach out for something, they'll reach out, and the team is good. And you kind of have to have that as your goal, to say, this needs to run as well or better without me as it did when I was there.
Yeah. And that's the look. Like, I'm here if you need me, but I'm not going to get in your way.
Right.
Sounds right. So just to maybe finish on that, we're going to, like I said, I wrote an article that there is no retirement, but rewirement, whatever you want to. And I think that's a good way to think about it. It's sort of I'll do work, but it'll look different than the work I have been doing. What's the next phase look like for you? What's on the agenda? What's your portfolio going to look like?
Yeah, so my wife has actually identified a series of, because she knows I like systems and process, she came up with the 5 Fs, which were, I wasn't quite sure where we were going with that, but it was friends, family, fitness, fun, and philanthropy, spelled with an F.
Philanthropy?
Yeah, philanthropy. And so, those are all appealing. But I think from a kind of staying engaged perspective, there are a couple of CEOs who've asked me to coach them, and they're both really successful, talented people who I like a lot. And so I've started to do that already. I have been leading a CEO project group, as you well know, but I've been the odd man out in terms of both being the member and the leader of the group, which is
player coach,
which is right, exactly, which has been phenomenal. Just because, as you know, you and I started together in a group. probably close to 30 years ago, I'm guessing. And so I'm a huge fan of of this particular peer group process, just because it's incredibly powerful. So I'm going to do that. And then I have a book concept I have that's all about the culture of connection, and I call it the secret sauce. That I'm starting to kind of see if there's any energy around that. But I think we've got a kind of a unique perspective on the way our business has grown. And as I look around thinking about all the things that polarize us, having an opportunity to look at it and say, it's actually a business model to create a culture of connection. And how is that different? And what kind of benefits does it have? I think there may be a book in it. Maybe nobody will buy it. Nobody will read it. But, we'll see.
I actually think it's a very rich topic. When you get into it, we ought to talk about it, because I'd love to. Done a little work in that space. So
that'd be great.
Awesome. This is better than your first book idea of ergonomics.
I frequently said that you have such a good memory.
Yeah, well, when you started going down organizational cholesterol, I'm like, oh my God, he hasn't forgotten about it yet.
There are certain things we'd like you to forget, Jim.
I'm going to run for president and see if I can do that. So
you're good on a teleprompter, so that's good.
There you go. Awesome. Well, Kirk, this was spectacular. Just a lot of great ideas and deep experience that shows in all your answers. And I think everybody probably learned a lot from you today. So thank you very much.
No, it's great pleasure to be with you. Thanks.
Awesome. And we'll see you next time on the Lazy CEO podcast. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.